really hit a big stride in 2020 when I almost died, actually. So I had gallbladder surgery, and I was weeks out from competing at the Arnold Classic Amateur for a bodybuilding show. And I had my gallbladder fail, went in for the surgery. And because I was so lean, I hypermetabolized a lot of their medications and I crashed on the table during surgery. So they thought I died for a couple minutes. And as I was recovering, they told my wife he might be a vegetable. We don't know.
To the Decentralized Health Podcast. It has been a long minute, but we are back with episode number 14, and it's an absolute banger. Today's guest is Alex Kikel. He is known as the Prep Coach or the Grand Master, and all for very good reasons, which you will find out in this podcast. He tells his story of how he's got from where he was to where he is, how he happens to have all this knowledge stored in his mind where he can just recall it as quickly as he needs to, and everything in between. I ask him about quantum biology, peptides, supplements, health conditions, and the man has the answer for it all. You're going to want to take notes with this one, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. So friends, welcome to episode number 14 and to Alex Kikel. Friends, welcome back to the Decentralized Health Podcast. It's been a minute, but we are back with an absolute legend today. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Alex Kikel to the podcast. Alex, it's so good to have you here, brother.
Appreciate you having me on, man. We've talked a couple times before this, and it's always a great conversation. So this will be fun.
This is going to be amazing, brother. It's going to be amazing. So before we delve into what we were talking about before we started recording, for people who don't know who you are, introduce yourself, explain to people what you do, how you are, where you are right now, and then we can actually start your hero's health journey, like the kind of the pre-frame for everything leading you up to being the Grand Master that you are.
Again, shout out to Ryan Russo for that nickname. I never changed it on Riverside, and I'll probably keep it always in his honor. So describing myself, okay, I am the luckiest person in the world. I have the best wife that's ever existed. I have 4 amazing children, 4 puppies. I literally am living my dream every single day. On like the business side of things, I say I fix biology because I don't know how else to explain it. Mm-hmm. It's essentially, if there's a biological problem, I fix it. It started off with bodybuilders and powerlifters and strongmen, then went into the NBA, NFL, NHL, then fixing organs. And there's some of these things are out of line timeline-wise, but it's literally from cancers to the NBA, to the IFBB, to general population, to biohackers, longevity, like I kind of do it all. So I kind of say I fix biology because then it spilled over into oncology with centers and working with a couple zoos on driving longevity for their animals with awesome animals, by the way. Yeah, like we're talking about lions, tigers, bears, bull shark, like a ton of different animals, zebras. And so biology, right? Because I just kind of do it all. So it's weird to explain, but I think that kind of summarizes it as best as I can.
Incredible. All right. So we're going to touch on the animal side of things because that's not an area that I've heard you briefly mention it before. But the bull shark sounds incredible. Lions sounds amazing as well. It's very when you said lions, tigers, and bears, I'm thinking Wizard of Oz. Like,
yeah, that's why I said it.
This guy's literally the wizard. Like that's what the Grandmaster name's coming back in. But for a little bit of setting a kind of like a story here, I believe everything. Just I was thinking about this before we started. Everything that leads you to being who we are right now, like who I am right now, who you are right now, has come from all the things that have come before. So starting from a place where you're happy to start and kind of bringing it here. Obviously, you're the man that everybody knows as, have it all, do it all. And, you're classing yourself as the luckiest man alive in your life. And, you've got all these amazing things happening, as we were discussing before we hit record. None of that would be possible without all of the experiences that you've had, the wins and the losses, the lessons and the failures leading up to this point. So let's start at a place where you're comfortable and let's just talk through it in a story kind of like way as to how you've become the Grand Master that you are.
I like this. So I'm always very hard on my sleeve, open person, very honest. I was the opposite person when I was younger than I am today. I was all through school. I was the jock. I was using women. I was manipulating women. I lied all the time. I stole so many things just because I thought it was fun. Like you go to a restaurant, just steal a salt shaker. Like, don't know why I did it, but like I was such a bad kid. And for whatever reasons that may have been that way, choosing my words carefully there, it was still my decision at the end of the day. And then, I used to work at Chipotle in college, and there was this girl at the front line because I was back on grill, and she would just drop the tortillas all the time. And this girl would stay bent over for a very long period of time, mind you. And so Alex would get an eyeful. That ended up being my wife. Like, it was literally one of those scenarios where we had one date, and the next morning I woke up, I said I was going to marry that girl. And at that point in my life, I was the opposite. I was the player again. I was not a good person. And then ever since we got together, that woman just changed my life forever, because I wanted to be a better person for her, not for myself, but for her. And then as we kind of progressed, your prefrontal cortex matures, you start to kind of find yourself in your 20s, right? Because that's when all this happened. I realized that I don't want to just be better for her. I want to start bettering this world. And then we got a puppy together, and I want to be better for little Molly, you know, our little Shih Tzu. We have 4 now, by the way, like I said. And then you have kids, and then you're like, I want to be better for them. And then you start impacting your wife, your children, and the world, and you realize, like, I can't change this world for the better. I want to be a better person. So to me, it really started when me and Lindsay first got together, probably 13 or 14 years ago now. Really hit a big stride in 2020 when I almost died, actually. So I had gallbladder surgery, and I was weeks out from competing at the Arnold Classic Amateur for a bodybuilding show. And I had my gallbladder fail, went in for the surgery. And because I was so lean, I hypermetabolized a lot of their medications, and I crashed on the table during surgery. So they thought I died for a couple minutes. And as I was recovering, they told my wife he might be a vegetable. We don't know. So me coming out of that, not knowing what happened, and then hearing all of that really hit me. That to me was like my consciousness experience, and where I really kind of went to that next level of interactions with the universe. As weird as that sounds, if anyone's out there and has had a life and death experience like that, near-death experience, you can relate. And then that just kind of kickstarted it, because I was already on the right path, but I wasn't being the person I wanted to be. And this was in 2020. 2 weeks after I got out of the hospital, the shutdowns happened with COVID and everything, which was the best thing in our lives, because me and Lindsay would take walks every day outside, and we talked. We talked about how I was screwing up, how I needed to be a better person, how I wanted to be a better person, and my life evolved from there. So it started with Lindsay, and then, again, seemingly a bad event, almost dying during surgery, completely changed my life around for the better. And that's how I got to where I'm at today, because I wake up and I have 9 reasons to never give up and to never stop working. You know, 4 kids, 4 dogs, and a wife. Soon to be 10 reasons, because we're going to have 5 kids. So it's like, when you have that kind of motivation, you know, I don't want to say I don't need energy, I don't need motivation, I don't need dopamine, whatever you want to call it, but like, I believe I could do anything because I'm doing it for them. When you do things for yourself, it's powerful. But if you're doing it for other people, that's where you literally cannot be stopped, no matter what it is. You might not get there right away. I've failed so many times, but each failure is just that delay in your success. If you keep going, you never truly fail. So I think that's kind of the starting point for my story and where I'm at now.
That's incredible, dude. And I think, you know, to take a word that you said there about the motivation behind it all. And I've actually put out like a reel about this, like, I think it was actually in 2020, about how, you know, you've got motivation, and then obviously you've got people like Jocko Willink who are like, you know, you've got to have discipline. And I was like, yeah, these two things are great, you know, because you need the discipline to be able to have the ability to do the things you need to do every single day. But ultimately, what's the driver behind the discipline? And I was like, well, it's desire. It's the desire behind the discipline that matters. You can have as much discipline as you want, but if you don't want to do it, it's just going to be really uncomfortable all the time. Where if you've got the desire, which is what I think you're talking about there, because of all of the people that you want to, whose lives you want to change, not just inside your family unit, but in the world, you have this now internal desire to be like, right, as Tony Robbins says, you're going to find a way or you're going to make a way, you know. And as I've heard you say many times in podcasts, there literally is nothing that we can't do. There's nothing that we can't fix. And if there isn't a way, then you're going to find it, because then you're going to be the first one who's ever done it.
Yeah, and that's exactly, if someone says I've never done that before, it's like, cool, I'll be the first. I don't have to tell anyone. It could just be me or my wife that knows, but like, there's always a way. And you said it right. It's that desire. It really, if you have that desire, then all of a sudden things don't matter so much. So we talked about some stories before we started recording where when life happens, it happens. And you can't take life that seriously, because life's going to happen. This is the whole entropy and chaos. If you want to get more into biomechanics and just the energies of the universe, chaos is always going to happen. There's always going to be random events that you can't control, but you can control how you react to those situations.
Yes.
So as the kids are screaming, dogs are vomiting, and there's water breaking off everywhere, which happened last night, everyone, you're cool, calm, and collected. Not that big a deal. You clean up the water. Kids are good. Clean up the vomit. Put the dogs in their room. Like, it's not that big a deal. If we can keep that peace throughout every day in our lives. And remember, I always tell people, like, the mantras. First of all, when you wake up, everything life's an opportunity. That's the biggest mantra that I tell everyone, because it is. That gets your day started off on the right foot. And then number two, as you're going throughout your day, remember, you talked before we recorded about how astrology is changing in the world right now, right? And how the duck's feet are going under the water really fast. It's that response to chaos that will then alter everything. So if you can start changing your response, and you can say my second mantra, which is everything in life is on my own schedule. If you say that and can truly live that, everyone, like in my daily life, I have 100+ people every day that always want my attention. Phone calls, emails, texts, family, dogs, friends, neighborhoods, whatever. Everyone always wants that attention. And instead of seeing that as a negative, you go, I'm going to get to everyone, but life's on my own schedule. So I'll spend that extra time with you, or I'll spend that extra time with my kids. And then I'll get to everyone else later on. And you slowly do that because it's on your own schedule. You're not giving into the chaos of the universe. You're controlling that, at least as best as you can.
Exactly. It's not letting people drink from the cup. It's letting people drink from the overflow of the cup, because you're constantly filling it up with the things that you want to do on your time schedule. And one of the words that you were saying, and I'm assuming you said it quite deliberately when you were saying, because you said it quite powerfully, is response. Because children react, adults respond. And it reminded me very much of a quote from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, where he said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is your power to choose your response. And in your response lies your growth and your freedom. So, example, the water starts to overflow in your sink. You've got a very short split second there where you're aware you're about to choose how you're going to react. You could completely flip your lid and go mental, or you could be like, right, okay, well, me getting angry only really hurts me and will probably affect the people around me, energetically speaking. And then everything from there is going to fall into an entropic chaos event, because I've capitulated and added to that through the energies that I'm putting off. Where if I stay calm, centered, almost like that Taoist kind of like wu-wei effortless action of, well, it's already happening, so I can either be part of that flow or I can be that resistance to it. Well, the resistance isn't going to help, because that's the unstoppable force in the immovable object. And when they meet, nothing happens. So flow with it. And when you flow with it, you are that kind of like that grand master doing the Tai Chi, where they're just flowing with everything. You're the bamboo in the wind. You're just flexing and bending to whatever happens, rather than being that rigid oak tree that will eventually in a storm get blown down because it's too rigid. So I think that choice of word, response, is a very, very powerful word, which people, I think, don't pay too much attention to when it comes to deciding how they're going to act within certain things, and understanding that it all comes down to choice. Everything is down to choice. Everything that happens in your world, everything that happens in my world is ultimately my fault, because it's my choice. I get to choose how I react to those things. I get to choose to be in a particular place at a particular time, and then I get to choose how I react to that. So I think that's a very powerful message, dude. I really do.
I appreciate you picking up on that one subtle word difference, because I try and be very specific with a lot of my verbiage. And if you look at everything we just said, but maybe you don't want to get into the energetic side of things, look at it from the neurochemical aspect, because we can explain these things in quantum mechanical terms, biological terms, pharmaceutical terms, neurochemical, choose all these different words. Neurochemically, it's that lizard brain to limbic system to prefrontal cortex, that process that occurs that gives you time or not enough time to make the right decision. So the people that make those snap responses and fight what's going on, it's a process that's happening too fast. If you can slow that down and really hypertrophy your prefrontal cortex, which in today's society, it's used to be 25 years old. Now I think people aren't ever maturing that, just because of society, all the social media, and just the downregulation in neurochemistry. If you can delay that process and hypertrophy that prefrontal cortex, you can make the right decision because you have more time. It's not our time on our clock. It's not like a picosecond or a second or 10 seconds. It's the same amount of time, but you perceive reality differently. So when those moments happen, and this happens to me multiple times throughout the day, it's not that the world stands still, but for a split second, everything stops and everything gets analyzed in my head, and I prioritize. And it's okay, if my kids are not getting hurt, if my wife's not getting hurt, no one's getting hurt, then, that drops down to a different priority.
Yep.
In that scenario, because I told the story beforehand, I'll tell everyone because I didn't really say it all. Water, the sink was overflowing in our kitchen. While that happened, the kids were all screaming about something. Gwen started crying, and then some of the dogs started vomiting. And again, as parents, you know it like always happens at one time, right? But in that moment, you pause, you go, okay, dogs are fine, kids are healthy, Lindsay's fine. There's no health problem. Okay, water, going to damage the house if it keeps going. So I'm going to shut that off, throw towels down. Kids, everyone go to the couch. Dogs go to their room. You put them away so everyone's safe and secluded. You take care of the water damage. You clean it all up. Then you go up, make sure the kids are good because the dogs are in their room. They're not going to get into trouble. Okay, cool. You go up, you clean up the vomit because if not, the kids will go over and walk into that, make more of a mess around the house to clean up. You don't want that because that's just more stress. So take care of the kids, then the vomit, then the dogs, then your life's normal. And then you just figure out the problem of what caused the water damage in the first place, what caused this thing to overflow. But if you can stop, and it doesn't happen like this overnight, it's taken me decades, well, probably over a decade, not decades, but at least one full decade to be able to analyze in this scenario to where I'm basically living in a flow state. I will switch. I'll have different versions of myself, work Alex, family Alex, training Alex, because right now, nothing else in the world matters but this time with you. I'm giving you all of my energy, all of my focus. If I get a text or a phone call from my wife and it's something emergent about the kids, I'm gone. Peace. Love you, dude. I'll talk to you later. We'll do this again. I'm going to take care of the kids. But it's shifting priorities so you can be in one constant flow state and just switch from flow state to flow state.
Yeah, I agree with you, brother. And you know what? Anders Ericsson talks about that in his peak performance book. Obviously, then his understudy, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, talks about it in his book, Flow. And we briefly touched on it again before we recorded, I believe, about Wu Wei, about the art of effortless action, doing without doing from the Taoists. And it is all about that flow and understanding that, again, bamboo, be that immovable object, but be anti-fragile enough to have that flex where you can bend and go wherever the world's taking you. Because again, as I said in that quote at the beginning, adjust your sails for the winds of the day. Because as we said again at the beginning, we plan, God laughs, because nothing is ever set in stone. It will change inevitably because that is how life is. And like you, it's taken me, I think I'm probably a little bit older than you, it's taken me probably decades to get to that point where I have this inner flow, this Zen place where I go to, or as Muji Mala says, I sit atop the mountain of my own being. Like I'm very observant and I'm the watcher of what's happening within me, because I don't, and you don't, and nobody else does, ever experience life outside themselves. You experience everything from within. So you do get that almost that matrix effect where everything starts to slow. And you're like, okay, cool. Brain, I understand you work things on a priority level. Everything in the body works on a priority level. Threats, all those things, is all priority levels. Okay, so what's the major priority? This. Okay, so let's deal with that. That moves that down to that priority, which means now that one's the priority, which means I can deal with that, and so on and so on. And it does take practice, which leads me to a point I was actually going to bring up a little bit later in the talk, but something else we'll bring up now. Obviously, when people look at you, prep coach, bodybuilding, athletes, sport, all those other types of things, and there's obviously like within your school community, which we'll talk about in a little bit as well, you've spoken about kind of like the neurological side of things as well. And you have spoken about it in other podcasts as well. But obviously the brain still being, I guess, like a muscle, which we have to work and train. At what point on your journey did you realize, okay, mine's atrophying in a way where I need to now take control of this, and I now need to bring in these neurological drills, things that are going to help upregulate the parts of my brain, which are going to make my decision making better, my first principles thinking quicker, more expansive, have that more open view to allow that flow? Like, how did that all start for you?
So I missed this part in the story. This is in high school. Before I met Lindsay, I was playing lacrosse and I got a TBI. Couldn't walk, talk, couldn't do anything for 6 months. I don't remember playing the rest of the game, but I got up, scored a goal, and then just collapsed. I got those memories back from the game, but I don't remember the following 6 months where my family took care of me. So at that point, it got me on the whole journey, which led to studying nutrition, dietetics, and then performance enhancement, injury prevention. That led me down the whole college route, which led me to Chipotle working there, which led me to Lindsay. So actually the TBI was technically, again, a bad event, a negative event, which turned out to be the best thing that could have happened to me. Because that changed my trajectory for the rest of my life. So it started there. I didn't start doing a lot of neurochemical work directly at that point in my life because I was like 18 years old. I'm like, you don't know about this stuff yet. But it was always on my mind. And then once I kind of pushed into the industry I wanted to get into and understanding about nutrition and training and pharmacology and all this cool stuff with biology, you start to pick up on, oh, the brain's kind of important, kind of dictates a lot. So that's what kind of started that. It was probably right around pretty heavy in 2020. Everything kind of started after that whole gallbladder experience where I realized I wasn't hypertrophying my brain in the right direction. I was learning a lot of bad habits, and I need to unlearn those and learn new skills. So it started there with the neuroplastic work, with the speech work, with the cursive writing, with the nootropic aids, with everything neurochemical. Kind of started there, but I'd had a lot of cleanup work to do from the concussion in high school.
Amazing. And have you ever gone down the more, I guess, the more Eastern traditional route in the sense of like we spoke Taoism, meditation, all those other types of things. Have you looked down that route as well? Because that's a lot of the time where if we mention flow, if we mention that kind of mindset, that's the route that most people will think. Obviously, you've done a lot of the biochemical work. Have you ever gone down that route? Do you do like the meditation, the breath work or pranayama or anything like that?
I think you kind of have to, right? So to me, everything's a tool. It's just to be used at the right time and in the right application. So in the right neurochemical environment, you should be taking some kind of a supplement and or peptide. You should be doing some kind of an action, some kind of a meditative work, some kind of a breath manipulation to alter carbon dioxide and oxygen ratios, and something to drive that whole conscious connection. Doesn't matter what religion you believe in or where you're at on this whole conscious journey. You need to understand the energies of the universe and how we're connected. And you can understand that by the simple fact of, you know, whatever, your mom called you that night and you were thinking about her all day. That's just quantum entanglement. You start thinking and seeing those little coincidences, but then they always add up. Like I was carrying a fan out of this office this morning and I just had the gut feeling like I should move my foot to the left as I'm walking. And so I did. And I'm glad I did because the bottom base fell off and it would have smashed my left foot. And that happens to me probably 2 to 5 times per day where you have that, you can call it consciousness, you can call it that gut instinct, but I'll have that, you listen to it and you just respond before something happens pretty much autonomously. So you mentioned some cool names. I'll go back to Dragon Ball Super, Dragon Ball Z, because I love the anime stuff.
I love all the anime stuff. Please do.
The ultra instinct that Goku is going for, like that's what this is. It's getting into that state where you can react autonomously. But you have to be able to connect it all. So essentially what we're looking at, and this could be debated, whether your consciousness is like 3 feet around your head or around us. We really don't know for sure, but I think that's a pretty good guess, right? So you have this conscious ability, but to connect that with our meat suit, because we're basically a vibrating ball of strings all kind of pulled together if you really want to kind of get creepy about it. Consciousness connects to the brain. Brain has to connect to the heart central nervous system. That heart central nervous system then connects with the rest of the body. So if you're missing in any portion of that actual pathway, things get downregulated and you can't fully react autonomously and you can't slip into your flow state at will. So this is where the neurochemical work comes in, where you can't just take supplements. You can't just do neuroplastic drills. You can't just do your breath work. You can't just do your yoga or your meditating. To me, it should all be done together if you're truly trying to maximize your neural output and really your output as a human being.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think everybody will go through phases of going through these stages of when they pick these things up. So I started the more spiritual side when I was very young. I started meditating when I was 13, started working with crystal energies, became a Reiki master when I was 24. So I went through that whole side of things very, very early on, all the Buddhist teachings and all that stuff and Tai Chi and martial arts. That exposed me to all that energetic side. But for people that may not have yet experienced those things, all we can say from the energetic perspective is when you walk into a room and 2 people have been arguing in that room, but now it's silent because they've stopped arguing. When you walk into that room, you can feel it. You know that something's not right in that room. Or if you walk into a club or a bar or somewhere and you've just got that really weird feeling that something's about to kick off in there and you probably shouldn't be there. It's those same types of feelings. It's just your spidey sense is tingling, so to speak, right? If you're going to go down that kind of that superhero Marvel anime route.
It's all resonance, right? It literally is all resonance. And you can equate that to food, right? So if you look at a donut, I use the donut versus sweet potato argument all the time where, yes, there's other manufactured components in a donut versus sweet potato. There's your vitamins and micronutrients in the sweet potato. It's not in the donut. But even more so than that, it's resonating, that food, again, because we're looking at below the subatomic particle level. This is technically below the subquantum level. It's how things energetically spin at their smallest component out there, right? That we can't even measure. That resonance of the donut isn't cohesive with the resonance of our biology. So it's literally vibrating and moving throughout space and time at a different resonance than our bodies are. The sweet potato is closer to our biology. So it's more receptive and gives us what we perceive as health, right?
Yep.
So there's other components to it, but if you really break things down to that basic standpoint, you can kind of explain anything. And this goes back to the Tesla energy, frequency, vibration. Like everything keeps coming back to that. And every single millionaire and billionaire that I've ever consulted with and worked with, they all do this. Every professional athlete out there is doing this energetic work in some variety and fashion. So if the most successful people in the world are doing this, to me, it's kind of, your ears should perk up like, oh, I should probably pay attention to this.
Yeah, I agree with you. And what you just said there about the donut and the sweet potato, I've heard you say on a podcast before, and I think it's the easiest way to understand and also visualize from, because obviously I do the quantum biology side of things as well, circadian biology and all those other types of things. It just explains why seasonal eating based on the location, latitude, longitude, where you are on the earth matters. Because if you're not getting your feet touching on the earth, your body doesn't know where you are. If you're not exposing yourself to light, skin and eyes, your body doesn't know where you are and doesn't know what time of year it is. And when you do, it will match that same resonant frequency and light and photons and electrons of the food. And then that light barcode, that energetic barcode of that food as it goes into your body will get scanned in a way. And your body will go, it's the right food from the right place. I know this. Where if you're eating a banana from Brazil and you're in the middle of Seattle in winter and you don't have bananas there because there's no UVB and bananas just don't grow there, there's a mismatch. So you can look at it from both directions, but that's a beautiful way of explaining why that seasonal eating piece is so important, but also not something that you want to kind of like die on a crossover. Like if you want to eat a donut, but just don't make it a consistent thing. Because I've heard you say this before, like I laughed when I heard you say it. So like if I'm at my kids' parties and there's cake, I'm eating cake.
Yeah, right. Again, so this will kind of cross over, I'll say more in the longevity space, right? Where we look at more food quality and people living and dying by food dyes, preservatives, and all these things that are found in foods that are technically worse for our biology. It is moderation, right? So if we look at everyone out there who's doing everything wrong, they're still living to be 70 or 80 years old. They're not taking any peptides, any supplements. They're not exercising. They're eating terrible food. So our biology is meant to exist and survive. So if you're doing everything right, you're telling me you don't have the flexibility to handle a little bit of food dye or a little bit of extra whatever type of fats that are terrible in those donuts or pizzas or cakes. Or to me, it's all about moderation. Because if you then compare that to anyone who's ever lived over 100 years old, they all say a couple things. One of them is that they all had love. Could have been dogs or kids or a loved one, but they all had love. They had some kind of a reason to get out of bed every day. They had purpose. And part of the whole social experience of food is that social concept. It is enjoying an event with good food, good people, and allowing love to just be in the world. And it sounds super hippie, but it's true. You can feel you're so happy. It's not just the sugar, the doping from the cake. It's the environment that's introduced into. Because you can eat that cake probably in the dark, in a completely different scenario, no family members, and see how much dopamine you get from that cake. Probably not at all, unless if you're starving, but we're not talking like, semantics there. So to me, it is. To me, it's moderation. I think the key to longevity, to biohacking, to everything is really moderation. Biology, it hates extremes. To me, right in the middle where things are balanced. And that's the yin and yang conversation. No matter where you want to look at it, there has to be balance. There has to be chaos. There has to be order.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think both of us could probably talk about that extreme nature side of things. So again, I was talking to a client about this yesterday where I was like, I said to this guy, like, you need to read David Deida's Where the Superior Man, because he talks about masculine and feminine polarities from an energetic perspective, about how a man needs to be a man to allow a woman to be a woman, and a woman needs to be a woman to allow a man to be a man. And I said to him, the reason, and he's like, why do I want to read that? We're talking about like how I train and the supplements I take. I'm like, because you're an extremist. You're a type A. So if you're training, you are doing 36 hours of training a day, 29 days a week, taking all the supplements. You are all the way over here being extremely masculine, being very dopamine, being very yang. And you need that balance to be able to come back in and have that receptive nature of the yin. Like, you need to have that. I was like, so please read this book, because it will explain to you in a very poetic way that there are polarities, and there is deliberately polarities, because in the universe, everything exists in duality. There is no single thing. There's no myopic point in universe. It is all duality. And when it shifts in either direction, it will swing back. That's just the way the momentum works. So I think you're quite right with that regard. Like, there is I think that's half the problem with society now, is there's too much extreme. You've got to be that balls to the wall, hard grinding entrepreneur who sleeps 2 hours and he's working all the time and he's having to take copious amounts of this. No, you don't have to. You're choosing to, but it's not good for you because eventually that's going to break. Because I think I've heard you say this before, like it works until it doesn't. And that's because, again, you've gone too extreme. You don't want to be taking like a peptide or a supplement all the time. You can, like at maybe a lower dose, so it's not considered an extreme, but you don't want to be doing it all the time, because eventually it's like drinking caffeine all the time. You just reach that baseline point where you don't really get anything from it anymore. And the only way you do is by taking more. And that's the same with porn, that's the same with food, it's the same with drugs, it's the same with all those things. You just end up needing more. So I think balance, as you say, is the way with all of these things.
So you're going to like this. This goes out to your client specifically. So the athlete you were just talking about, right?
Yeah.
The reason why it's important to understand masculine and feminine energy and polarities, and I'm going to bring this full circle, so everyone bear with me, right? In nature, water coming off of mountaintops, hitting off of rocks, picking up all these cool little vitamins, minerals, micronutrients, all the good stuff in there. Maybe not vitamins, but we got a lot of the cool stuff in there, right? As it's hitting off the rocks, it's having left and right spin. Masculine and feminine energies. That's causing the hydrogens and oxygen bands to be pulled apart and create a charge. That's structuring the water. So if you understand masculine, feminine energy and polarity, you understand how important that is for structured water. You then go ahead and take the step further and go, okay, if structured water improves communication systems internally of biochemical processes, what happens if I structure the water that I use to structure my peptides? You get more protein-based cell-to-cell communication because the water vessel that your peptides are being rehydrated in is structured and more coherent. So you can put it in your quantum block or whatever kind of device you like to use to structure your water, and all of a sudden now your peptides work 20% better or 25, depending on the person. There's a lot of differences there, but understanding feminine and masculine energy goes all the way to making your peptides work better.
I love that tie-in. That's incredible. Dude, I love your brain.
Just thought of it.
I love your brain. It's incredible. Okay, so let's move into the peptide side of things. And this was something that I've been dying to ask you because it's something that I think about all the time. So if we take that quantum biology, that circadian biology approach, and we look at supplements and peptides, do you or have you thought about the application of the quantum and circadian principles of timing with peptides or supplements? As an example, UVA exposure in the morning helps that conversion of aromatic amino acids like tryptophan and all the rest of it into the other precursors. So would taking something like a tryptophan or selenium in the morning make more sense from that circadian perspective? Same with like a peptide like melanotan, because it's working on the alpha melanocortin system, which obviously then gets activated through UVA and the circadian signals in the morning. Would pinpointing those points through the day of taking these types of things matter, or do you not think of it that way?
1,000% yes, but not all the time. So let me explain. So melanotan 2 is a great example. So melanotan 1 is more of what I see as the neurological consciousness-based player, where melanotan 2 drives more of like the adipocyte-based like apoptosis, drives some changes to insulin sensitivity and hematology. They both will darken your skin, pigmentation, melanocyte. We get all that stuff, right? So pick and choose there. But with those, they tend to cause nausea in a certain amount of people. Not everyone, but some. So if you take it in the morning, you're nauseous for the first couple hours. Versus if you take it before bed, you can sleep it off and never actually feel it. So first you have the nausea component to consider, where if you're that responder, okay, that's kind of going to dictate a lot of the timing, because then if not, you can't take it. Then we have, are we getting straight UVA? Are we getting straight outdoor sun exposure? What time are we waking up? Is that even feasible? What is someone's actual day? Because although on paper it might biologically make the most sense, if they're a night shift worker, that's probably not going to work. You'll have to move and time things around. So although I do time it off of that, you have to take the person in consideration. Another example that'll make a little more sense from a different aspect is basic vitamin D. So vitamin D receptors in neurological tissue is highly expressed in all those sleep-based regions. And also you can kind of consider, okay, at night, I'm going to sleep, I'm not getting sun exposure, so I'm not actually getting any exogenous vitamin D. That's when I should take my vitamin D. But although I think that's the case, people make the argument to take it upon waking, because certain individuals get stimulated by vitamin D in those nocturnal hours. So regardless of which is right, if you're getting stimulated from your vitamin D supplement, Worst time to take it's at night because you'll get more sympathetic. You can't go to sleep, and then nothing matters. So then you would want to consider the biological component of how the person responds, then put it upon waking. So you start off with what's the best on paper, and you go down to, okay, how's that person respond? And then from there, you go down to, is this even feasible for this person's lifestyle? And then that's why you can have 1,000 different protocols for the same peptide, because it's coming down to the person's basic biology.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because, again, I've thought about this vitamin D kind of, not argument, but disagreement of when the best time to take it would be. And obviously I'm then thinking, if I'm on a beach or if I'm out in the sun and I'm sunbathing, the first thing that happens is I fall asleep. So I instantly think, well, that would make sense then to take it in the evening because it will help with that whole cascade. But at the same time, as you say, some people will actually get very stimulated from vitamin D, so if they're out in the sun, they're going to get that blood glucose spike, then they feel energized. They're not going to be the right people to be taking at that time.
Right? Yeah. And then you could also make the argument that vitamin D can get potentiated from the exogenous application of sun exposure and the photonic exchange that happens, making your vitamin D supplement work better. So I could see arguments for both. What I see work 80% of the time better is before bed nocturnally. So I normally put it then, but there's still the 20%, and you could still make the argument that either or technically makes sense on paper. So you have to see what works in application.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That brings me to a question I was actually going to ask you as well, to do with melatonin. So obviously, again, heard you say this in podcasts before. I know this from the quantum space, that we're producing or creating our melatonin from light exposure. So when people are taking melatonin at night, I see people getting a really bad response because they will wake up literally like 90 minutes afterwards and then they can't get back to sleep again. So I don't think melatonin needs to be taken at night. I think it's more of a daytime thing, but I think also just get more light exposure. But if you did have to use melatonin for its oxidative reasonings or from any other thing from an apoptosis point of view, do you think morning, daytime would be a better place to use it instead of evening?
Oh, this is a cool one, man. You're good with the question. So if we go outside, get our sun exposure during the day, we are trapping more infrared light in our mitochondria, right? Our mitochondria, our cells, essentially, so not neurological tissue, is where the predominant amount of melatonin manufacturing occurs. So it's not all in the brain where everyone likes to think it happens. It's actually throughout the rest of our bodies based on the near infrared exposure. Correlate that with our society today that gets less sun exposure, more blue light overexposure. We are near infrared light basically deficient. And so I think one of the biggest reasons why cancer levels are on the rise is because when melatonin's high, tumor genesis is low. You can't grow tumors when melatonin's high. So we're so chronically depleted of near infrared light at a mitochondrial level, they can't spontaneously uncouple and release their mitochondria. So melatonin levels are down here all the time. So tumor growths just keep rising and rising. So the sun exposure conversation is interesting. The cold plunge conversation then allows your body to spontaneously literally shake and vibrate and release that near infrared exposure. So in your mitochondria releasing more melatonin. So now that that's understood, now we look at the reasons you could use melatonin. So if you have anything like the oncology cancer-based world, that's when you could probably even take melatonin morning and night, because we kind of want to always have artificially elevated levels of melatonin while we drive apoptosis of the cancer cell. If you're taking it more for like the anti-aging, antioxidant longevity standpoint, because that's a major player, you could dose it at pretty high doses before bed, but it depends on your response. Certain individuals, again, like you said, they will wake up 69 minutes later. I see most people tolerating melatonin on one of two camps. It's either crazy high dose before bed or microdose before bed, and they respond very well. And then same thing in the morning. If they don't respond well there, then they almost always respond better to it in more of a waking-based fashion. So I think you can kind of microdose it at night before bed if you need the sleep benefits, paired with Epimellin, maybe a little bit of GABA, something like that. If you want the longevity benefits, higher dose before bed as long as you can tolerate it. If you want more of the anti-tumor-based effects upon waking throughout the day, if you want to then pair that with sun exposure and some other cool players, definitely throughout the day as well. So you could do it a couple different ways.
Amazing. And you touched upon another thing I was going to bring up, because I haven't heard you talk about this much in podcasts before, is the cold exposure side of things. Now, I do that again for the UVA and the infrared release from the mitochondria, because obviously they produce their own UVA. I think it's like 335 nanowaves or something when you are in cold exposure, but it also helps liberate vitamin D as well, from what I understand. So if you're in like a wintertime period and you obviously are not getting that vitamin D exposure, if you have stockpiled your vitamin D through the summer, and obviously we know that the melatonin and the vitamin D, they kind of cross parcel across that same receptor. They switch over roles basically in the winter to the summertime. The exposure to cold, like an ice bath in the winter, would be a beneficial thing to add in, or maybe even the cold shower if it does the same thing, to help release that UVA, get that biophotonic response from the mitochondria to release that UVA on the inside, create your own infrared, as you say, and then help to liberate that vitamin D. So do you utilize cold yourself? And if you do, what's your kind of protocol approach with all of that?
So this is actually the first, so it's only been over the past, like the last winter, because I'm in Pennsylvania in the United States, right?
Okay.
I have not been able to tolerate cold plunging until recently because it makes me so sympathetic. Usually by the time I would do my cold exposure, like I'm like, okay, I'm doing enough for my day. I can't handle this right now. I forced myself. I did a whole adaptation period. I put some parasympathetic stressors in, pulled down to allow myself to adapt. But since I'm in Pennsylvania during the wintertime, I'd walk outside in my underwear. So because we had a terrible winter this last winter. For me, it was perfect because I would just go outside and get my cold therapy there. I'll get a cold plunge soon. I've just been putting it off because it's not my favorite thing to do, but it is 1000% something that's amazing. Pulling down HSCRPs, interleukin 6's basic inflammatory factors, then driving the whole vitamin D donation process, donating more melatonin to the system. It's an awesome therapy. The only time I am not a big fan is around more myotraumatic pressure periods like a workout, because we're trying to keep that inflammation as part of the adaptation response. But if you're about to compete or have something you don't want to be sore for, then you can use it around the training parameters to blunt the inflammation response. But other than that, cold plunges, cold therapies as a whole are kind of good any other time of the day.
Okay. And what's your thoughts about using cold exposure, like an ice bath, I guess, before training to upregulate the testosterone? And apparently you get a better mind muscle contraction. You're obviously getting all the adrenaline and all that kind of stuff as well. Do you think that's a good place to place it as well?
It can be. I'm not the biggest fan of that because of the pulling down on inflammatory factors, which we want during the workout. True. On top of that, then I tend to see more of a potential for injury go up. It's not like you're doing like a cold exposure during aerobic work. Cold exposure during aerobic work makes sense. You get the additional shivering, lipolytic beta oxidative effect. So losing more fat makes sense to me. If you're doing more like myotraumatic work, more hypertrophy and strength work, I see you having more of a potential for injury. So depending on how you set it up would kind of really dictate the answer to that. But most people, I'd save it for a different period of the day just to avoid potential injury.
Yeah. Okay. And I was listening to a podcast recently. I think it's the guy that created the Morosco Forge ice bath. He had a prostate cancer scare, I believe, and he had incredibly low T at the time. And he said that he used ice baths to basically heal himself. Now, I didn't go any further into the mechanisms of all of that. I know obviously it upregulates testosterone production, but I didn't know it would affect the prostate in that way. So I thought if there's anybody that's going to know the mechanisms behind that, it's going to be the Grandmaster here. So what could potentially be the mechanisms of all of that then?
So prostate cancer is more so driven by hypotestosterone and hypogonadal individuals than hypertestosterone and hypergonadal individuals. So literally, if you have prostate cancer and you're not on HRT and you have tanked testosterone values, that's hurting you. Testosterone exogenously has been shown to drive apoptosis of prostate-based cancer cells. So that's number one. Number two, you'll hear these crazy stories all the time and people say, oh, that can't be true just from a cold plunge, this, that, and the other. I've seen so many quote unquote miracles happen that I'm open to everything. I've never seen that personally happen, but if you understand the mechanisms of cold plunge, driving the mitochondrial exchange with that release of infrared exposure, then altering the actual uncoupling process that happens with androgen receptors and their ligand being like a testosterone DHT, it would make sense. Not so much DHT, different conversation, but the testosterone then would have greater uncoupling, increases testosterone values, and then indirectly drive apoptosis of cancer cells, while also pulling down inflammation, which is a pretty big driver on prostate cancer accumulation cellularly.
Yeah, I knew you'd understand it. I knew you would. Amazing. So another thing that I thought when I was going to speak to you, I was like, I want to touch on topics which I've not heard you speak about, because I can imagine as much as you love the peptide world and that type of stuff, there might be times to ask you different questions. So
I like it.
From again, going back to that quantum piece again, electrical beings, frequency, vibration, fascia. Now, fascia being a water dense matrix obviously helps carry that piezoelectric kind of power through us. And fascia holds trauma, has memory, because it holds that exclusion zone water as well. Do you utilize like fascial manipulation, like fascial release, or those other types of things? Because you're a big dude, so you're carrying a lot of mass. So do you utilize it yourself? Do you use it with clients? Do you think of it from that quantum perspective, or is it literally just to release the muscle because it's getting a bit tight?
So this is a cool one. I have some weird thoughts on it, so bear with me, right? So we have superficial fascia, which is what you're talking about, the tight musculature. Then we have subcellular fascia. The subcellular fascia is what goes into cells, goes into neurons, and essentially it's like the communication highway for our body. What rides that highway is mitochondria in water, specifically the easy-based water. So how I see it is mitochondria are anticipatory creatures. They're governing and dictating everything in our bodies before it happens. That is traveling along subcellular fascial networks with water, which carries the information to deliver that to the cell to tell the cell what to do. Because if you look at cells, say you have two right here, there's a cable between them, and another cable, and another cable. Look into those cables, and there's more cables connecting them. Look into those cables, more cables connecting. Everything's connected. So I see more of, because these things are firing faster than neurons are firing. Like that fascial water mitochondrial network is anticipatory and happening before you can even think about it and process it. So to me, I see mitochondria, fascia, and water really going hand in hand, but the subcellular fascia to me can't be manipulated manually. You could do that with superficial fascia. Makes sense, right? You're not manipulating a cell. Like you can't get in there and massage your, I wish you could, that'd be awesome.
That'd be good. That'd be amazing.
Instead, right, that's where I see the modulation on electromagnetism, the changes with the quantum world and all of this extra energetic work. That's what I see having the biggest impact on that subcellular fascial based layer. Same thing with the structured water, because if that's allowing better information to flow across those fascial networks, then you have better communication, better cellular end fates, and you're literally able to drive everything that much more efficiently. And that's where, like you said, people can hold on to the traumas and things of that nature. So it's definitely going into the psychology, psychological, and past trauma based work that you have to do. Because if you can't address those past traumas, then that subcellular fascial network can't kind of mature. If it can't mature, mitochondria and water can't travel across it.
Yeah, amazing. What beautiful. I love that description. That's incredible, dude. I hadn't even thought about that subcellular layer of fascia. I was thinking more surface, but that's okay. That's going to give me some stuff to research as well. But it reminds me, just while I remember, because I know you love cool new things, I found this company. It's not a plug. I don't know the owners, but I found this company called Deinia Water. They have got so many studies linked from Gerald Pollack and all these other guys from all these really cool universities in America. It's deuterium depleted. It's super oxygenated. It does a 14-layer filtration. It helps to build exclusion zone in the body. And Gerald Pollack tested that. So I was like, right, I need to tell Alex about this because this is a very cool water. And it's got a certain high level of parts per million as well. Like it's 130 parts per million for the deuterium. I don't remember what it is for the hydrogen, but it's basically like got everything in there that you talk about all the time. I was like, I need to tell him about this while I remember. And I've been drinking from it. I kept forgetting. I was like, I need to drop this in now.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. And usually I know like all the tools and gadgets out there. So I'm buying that after this podcast. That's cool.
So yeah, Deinia Water. I'll send you on the email. I'll let you know where you get it from. But that also then brings me to another question. You just started using this water imprinting device.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. How are you getting on with that?
I actually have something here. So absolutely love it. I think, so this is the infopathy device. And I try and be very honest, never mean or negative. I think they oversell on the marketing aspect where it can replace pharmaceuticals and supplements. I don't believe it's ever going to do that, but I see it being a good 20 to 30% improvement for the next 2 to 3 hours. So if you would chemically, not even chemically, but resonantly imprint caffeine into your glass of water, then you'll get 20% of the normal action of your normal caffeine for the next 2 to 3 hours. And I've tested that with myself. My wife is very unbiased. She doesn't believe in half the stuff that I do. And she felt a change, but it wasn't crazy noticeable, but it was definitely noticeable. And so to me, that's even a selling point in and of itself. If I can get 20% more for a couple hours, then all of a sudden after work before bed, I don't have to worry about not having caffeine or this, that, or the other in order to make sure I can stay and play with my kids. You have something like this. So I love it. I have a family blend with fisetin, spermidine, NMN, all these cool things. I have my dogs drink it every day. I have my wife, my kids drink it. So again, 20% for about 2 to 3 hours, but compounded over time, I think is absolutely miraculous. So again, we're looking at literally just imprinting the resonant code of whatever is on because you can make like the different protocols for yourself. So if you have curcumin or spermidine or whatever, it's just the resonant spin of what that is. You're putting that information into water so that water can communicate it with your body. So it's not the same thing as taking the exogenous supplement in and of itself for the exogenous peptide, but you could still get about 20 to 30% efficiency. I'm really liking it.
I think 20-30% is amazing. If somebody said to you, right, here's all the money that you've got, I'll give you 20-30% more, you'd be like, all right.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll be happy with that. So I think 20-30%, everybody's always looking for that thing that moves the needle by that 1%. So I think 20-30% is incredible. All right. I'm very conscious of your time, so I want to respect that because I know you've got another call after this one. So I got a lot of questions on Instagram that people wanted answered from the Grandmaster. So I'm going to go through them in the order that they came through. We're going to rapid fire these and see how these go. So are there any peptides to help with varicose veins?
Varicose veins, yes. Okay, so we want to look at vent for it first. So we're trying to improve just the overall oxygenation, hemodynamics of blood. You want to back that up with a little bit of tadalafil, and then you're going to be doing that with usually carbon dioxide therapy. So not really technically peptides, but pharmaceutical, a therapy, and then technically a bioregulator.
Beautiful. Amazing. All right. CJC 1295 NODAC plus Epimellin stacked with human growth hormone. Can you take both morning and night? What is the best approach?
You can, yes. If you take those peptides at least a little bit, could be 20 minutes or 30 minutes before your growth hormone, it'll potentiate the growth hormone receptor and allow better binding and transmission of your exogenous growth hormone. So if you were to wake up, take your IPAM, take your CJC, make your breakfast or go do your fasted cardio, whatever you're going to do, and then take your growth hormone or whatever, 20, 30 minutes, and same thing before bed. Before you go to bed, take your peptides, brush your teeth, you're ready for bed, take your exogenous growth hormone. It will potentiate your exogenous growth hormone. It will make it work that much better.
Amazing. And I have to say, one of the things that you said in another podcast I was listening to was about the microdosing MK677. That's been an absolute game changer when it comes to adjusting how much growth hormone I've been using. And then obviously like during the week with the growth hormone and then using MK on the weekends with all the enzymatic side of things. Incredible. My recovery has gone through the roof. So I just want to say thank you for that. It's amazing. How do you make your exosome reconstitution solution, and what's a good source to buy it from?
Sourcing is going to be hard because you have to generally know someone. So can't really answer that, especially publicly for obvious reasons. Usually you can just get whatever solution you can get and microdose it. So if you would get a solution, so usually the lowest you can get is what, maybe 10 billion, like the lowest vial you can get, pull out 1 IU, first reconstitute your peptide, then put that 1 IU into the vial. What's going to happen is those exosomes are going to improve, potentiate the healing factors and communication potential of those proteins in your peptides. And it'll be another factor to add another 20-ish% to your peptides. So you're literally microdosing it a smidgen. I haven't seen any kind of, because I've had friends that'll actually mass spec it at their labs, and there's been no degradation in exosomes. They're still live in that vial for, depending on the product, like a Juvexo, that'll last like what, 30 days or 90 days. It has a really long half-life. Wow. I haven't seen it degraded or any negative effects on actual mass spec testing with TB, BPC, GHK, CJC, IPAM, KPV, all the top like basic peptides, the top 10, haven't seen any negative interaction. We just see potentiation from the exosome. As long as it's from a good source, again, the shelf life is usually you'll go through the vial before it actually runs out.
Wow, did not know that. Awesome. I just wish the UK was a little bit more up on the exosomes, because you can only get the aesthetics ones here, which aren't the same thing. So you can't be putting those in your peptides and using them like that. It wouldn't work, unfortunately. Okay, this is a very interesting question. What's the best way to inhibit prolactin to help with refractory period?
So dopamine is literally known as prolactin inhibitory hormone, PIH. If you read any old biology textbook, biochemical, that's what they talk about. So prolactin is high, dopamine's low. To pull prolactin down, you have to push dopamine up. So you could go with the cabergolines and things of that world, but usually that's too chemically strong. You have some neurochemical problems with that. So instead, something like a 9-MeBC or Subroxy, Catwaba, bring in those dopaminergic-based players to pull down prolactin, to jack up dopamine. That'll then decrease your refractory period, and usually you can go from like one intimacy session to like 2 to 3 back-to-back without many problems.
Wow, says the ex-player.
Yeah, seriously.
That's from his little black book.
I didn't know that stuff back in the day, though. Like the stuff I could have used, like all the erectile growth. Like I just finished a protocol that I had to stop. I was able to add 1 inch to girth and length in a pretty short period of time. But my problem is, like me and my wife were made for each other in every single way perfectly, like every single way. And that now became a problem because things just don't fit like the way they used to. But yeah, I wish I knew the stuff like back in the day. Actually, no, I'm glad I didn't, because I would have gotten into more trouble, so it worked out.
It's worked out well for you. Okay. Why does Epimellin and CJC cause water retention? Does this mean you already have too much growth hormone?
So all growth hormones, so all somatropic compounds, exogenous growth hormone, CJC, IPM, hexarelin, all of them have the potential to just drive fluid accumulation because of the nature of exogenous growth hormone and growth hormone itself. So growth hormone as a whole can pull in fluid to not just intramuscular layers, but subcellular and actually we'll say subcutaneous layers. That makes a little bit more sense. So depending on who you are, you might hold all that fluid intramuscularly. You might spill over and have some of that subcutaneous layer. So it's purely dependent on the person. I don't think it has much to do with your own endogenous growth hormone values, because I've seen tanked IGF levels and people still have edema, but having all the other positives of growth hormone. So we can't really use lab work. And growth hormone serum-wise is acute. Doesn't matter. IGF's a longer-term factor, which is better to test. Even at that, that's one growth factor out of hundreds or thousands out there. So it's not, we can't really get that good of lab work results, but you have to use something. So usually IGF to test, but you can get edema independent of those levels.
Awesome. All right. What are your thoughts on SGLT2 inhibitors for bodybuilding and protection?
Tremendous. Yes, they can have a lot of renal, hepatic, and some cardiac-based benefits. You can go down the line of seeing how it improves nutrient partitioning, so you could use better utilization of your nitrogen in terms of muscle cells. You can store more glucose as glycogen, and you tend to just throw more lipids, so more fats you take in onto that beta oxidative wheel that you're burning through the day just to fuel your normal activity. So usually the lower doses work out pretty good. Depends on what else is in play, though, because polypharmacy comes into play here, right? If you have insulins and metformins and you're starting to stack up these players, at what point do you become too insulin sensitive and start, becoming too hypoglycemic? Some hypoglycemia is actually pretty good for beta oxidation. Too much just causes more strain on vascular systems, and over time, that'll just drive more atherosclerosis.
Okay, so, I know the answer to this, but I'll ask you anyway. Semaglutide, tirzepatide, or retatrutide, which one is better at decreasing cravings for alcohol or any other peptide for substance abuse?
Semaglutide. I still use that every single time if I have any kind of an abuse or withdrawal, Suboxone, MD, like whatever kind of problem, we always go back to semaglutide. It works that much better.
Yeah, definitely. What is available in the peptide community that will slow or stop head tremors?
So usually, so are we talking about like the Parkinson's dopaminergic lax shaking based thing, or what kind of tremors?
I think so. They weren't very specific, but that's exactly what I thought. I thought about, or maybe some kind of maybe like a muscular trauma where the head kind of shakes a little bit, something like that, maybe.
So you'd probably want to look more at like a cerebral lysine and a 9-MeBC, because cerebral lysine will donate more neurotrophic factors to drive neural healing. 9-MeBC would then repair dopaminergic neurons, or rather dopaminergic receptors, as well as supply more dopamine. So depending on what you're talking about tremor-wise, because there'd be a couple different kinds, that combination almost can't go wrong. Might not be as specific as you need, but that'd be a good place to start.
Beautiful. Okay. 48-year-old male baldness still has follicles. Is GHKCU, C60, and infrared light best with microneedling the area before?
That you can also do topical exosomes if you can get someone to actually manufacture KY1938 too. That's a peptide that can actually regrow and will drive neurogenesis of follicles. That's why my hair looks so awesome most of the time, because I have one guy that'll just do it for me. Someone needs to supply that to everyone though, because it's still taking forever to get out there. But there's a lot of, you could do the topical fatty 15s, topical urolithin A, topical dragon's blood, topical pearl powder. Like you could put a huge concoction into your head and you can kind of see not linear progression, but these will be an extra 1 to 5%. So if you're like having a lot of problems, dump it all on your head, honestly. If not, you can kind of scale it back.
So whoever asked that question, if you're listening, you've just been given an amazing supplement that you could sell to the world. So there's your entrepreneurial venture right there. Okay. Thoughts on FOXO4 and how would you dose for a healthy person?
Nice. I'll make this my last question because I do have to go on another call. Sorry about
brother.
that. So FOXO4, big senescent cell remover, big senolytic agent. It's chemically so strong though. So if you're undergoing a stem cell therapy, something like that, obviously do a protocol beforehand to make sure you're not replicating damaged cells, but kind of bringing it in maybe quarterly or infrequently throughout the year. Because again, it's so chemically strong. We don't want no senescent cells because they can drive their own apoptotic and overall like recycling cascades. We don't want too much. Again, biology, we don't want extremes, we want right in the middle. So usually microdosing it maybe 1 milligram for 10 days in a row, once a quarter or once or twice per year is generally more than enough, assuming you're someone that has like spermidine, fisetin, and all the basic players already in the background daily. FOXO is super strong, so we want it less frequent and you don't need that high of a dose.
Amazing. Alex, thank you so much for your time, brother. I am so grateful for you coming on. I know that you are a man that does it all and has it all, so I know how busy you are, and I appreciate your time. So before you go, where can everybody find you if they want to work with you? If they, I don't know if you're still taking on clients or if you're just doing like the consults or whatever, but where can everybody find you? And I'll also put it in the show notes below as well.
Yeah, still taking on clients. Again, I'm finding a way to still do it all. It's theprepcoach.com. I have my members group at school, so skool.com/TPC Army. And that's kind of it. All the consulting goes to the website. I have an Instagram, but I just post things up there. So it's at Alex_KIKEL. That's kind of it.
Beautiful. And guys, I have been part of Alex's school community. It is incredible. Like, it's what he's just done here, but magnitude by a million. And the amount of protocols and knowledge the man gives out in that school community is insane. So for the money that it is, it's just an easy thing to do. Go and sign up. It's incredible. You'll be amongst amazing people like me. So please go. And thank you again, Alex, for coming. I really do appreciate you, brother. So, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Alex Kikel. Thank you for watching and listening to the Decentralized Health Podcast. And until next time, stay blessed and stay well.